All right, Buffalo Bills, a team that's been, Brandon Beane has built a lot of that roster. A lot of their best teams were built off the backs of free agency, off of the moves of elsewhere. But the money's kind of drying up there. This year's free agency period was mainly about retaining. Retain Josh Allen, retain Greg Rousseau, retain Terrell Bernard, retain DeMar Hamlin, Ty Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Signed a couple of budget guys, Josh Palmer, Michael Hoyt, Joey Bosa, with all his injuries, only came fairly cheap at 1 year's $10 million, $12 million. Larry Ogunjobi as well. So no real big names. What do you think? What kind of grade would you give this free agency period for the Buffalo Bills?
I gave them a B, Mike. Great job by Brandon Beane retaining some really, really significant contributors for their team. Doing right by those players was definitely important, especially the homegrown guys they drafted, and they have earned the extension they received. So that was a plus. The Josh Palmer signing, over $30 million, I was a bit surprised. Clearly, it was a very, very, deep wide receiver class in free agency, and it was almost like it was a traffic jam of light players. And they went and gave Josh Palmer $30+ million. I didn't see that happening, but potential is there, especially playing with a guy like Josh Allen. So let's see how that play out. The thing that kept them in this B category for me, the Joey Bosa signing, we got to wait and see, to be determined. He's been oftentimes injured, hasn't really lived up to the billing of the player he became early on in his career because of injuries. We have to wait and see. But one thing that really hurt their free agency class that I really thought could elevate them, you talked about signing Larry Ogunjobi and also Michael Hoyt from the Rams. Two significant pieces that add depth and experience to the defensive line, but they will be suspended the first 6 games.
Yeah.
That hurt. If those guys were not suspended, they would have a better grade from me, because I really like those moves in what they added to depth on the defensive line and experience. You know what I mean? And they're role players, but they're really, really good role players when you look at everything else the Buffalo Bills have already on the defensive front. You know what I mean? So that's why I kept them in that B category, because when that news came out, it was like a gut punch. Like the Bills fans got punched in the gut, because he's like, what? 6 games? And that's a lot. That's a lot of games. So I gave him a B.
Sometimes, though, you love signing those guys because that means they're going to be at their peak performance, right? That means they were taking. When you take PEDs, that means they are, they're going to come back ready to rip. Is all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, the Buffalo Bills, I agree. I'm right there with you. B. It was kind of business as usual. This is how they operate in free agency. They sign vets who come cheaper. They sign guys who were starters elsewhere who aren't commanding big money deals. That's the Josh Palmer one. Wide receiver, though, I don't know what the plan is here, man. They also signed Laviska Shenault. So on their roster right now, you have Keon Coleman, Josh Palmer, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Laviska Shenault, KJ Hamler, Jalen Virgil, Tyrell Shavers. Like they have a hodgepodge of wideouts where it's like, who plays what role? Who does? There's not really a defined, which, you have Josh Allen. To not have, a guy for him at wide receiver, and Keon Coleman based off his rookie season and just how just not well he got open consistently.
Yeah.
I don't see him developing into the guy at wide receiver. It's going to be tough. It's just, now obviously he played like an MVP and was the MVP without it, but your path is making this offense unstoppable, right? It's not going to be the backs of this defense. The defense is what it is at this point. You're too many pieces away from being an elite defense to really think that's going to be the case. But I don't think you're that far away from being an unstoppable offense. And I just don't think they've done it at the receiver position. And what worries me is they've signed so many guys that I don't think they're going to address it in the draft. Like, I don't think they're going to take another swing to try to find that guy. So
this is a pretty deep wide receiver draft, as you know. So.
Yeah. So we'll see. I gave him a B, though, because, again, not a lot of money, and I think they could have more dividends than what they ended up signing those guys for. All right, Miami Dolphins, who didn't have a ton of cap space to play with, right? They're kind of up against it. That's why they let Javon Holland, their second-round safety, one of the best safeties in the NFL, walk out the door to the New York Giants. They signed, though, James Daniels to play along the interior of that offensive line. Didn't come too expensive either, coming off that Achilles injury. Signed Zach Wilson, signed Larry Borum, signed Nick Westbrook-Akina, Ashton Davis. A lot of smaller deals. Obviously, they didn't have the money to play with. What do you think about this Dolphins free agency period?
I gave them a passing grade. I gave them a C-. That's a passing grade. Didn't have a lot to work with. It was low moves in trying to improve and develop. So more so their grade is about waiting and seeing how some of these low moves, come to light in terms of the development. Now, when you look at losing Javon Holland, that's a significant piece in my opinion, because throughout his 4 years in Miami, last year was his worst year. And there was a lot going on with the entire team. But when you look at what he did in his first 3 years, he was a talented guy. So you bring in Ashton Davis, who's never was known to be a significant starter. Potentially that's his role for him to try to fill. And it was just, very, very moderate moves. You know what I mean? So this is more about waiting and seeing what happened in terms of the development. But to your point, there wasn't a lot they could really do. So it was about, going and trying to be a bargain shopper and find the best bargain prices that we can get.
Yeah, I like the James Daniels move. Now, obviously, you're off Achilles. It may not be his best season. But for that number, like year 2 and year 3 of that contract, you could be having a quality starter because that's what he had been. Prior to that, I gave him a C+, though, just because back-to-back seasons, your ideal scenarios when you draft guys in the top 50, Christian Wilkins and then Javon Holland, you just let them walk. They just walked out the door. You had home run picks, guys who were amongst the best at their respective positions, top 10 sort of players at their positions in the NFL. And you're like, sorry, just walk out the door. That to me is just not how I want to operate a franchise.
No,
I want
not losing both.
I want my guys who are first rounders coming in knowing that if I ball out for 3 seasons, I'm getting paid and I don't have to go anywhere else the rest of my career, right? I want to know that I will be taken care of. And now if you're drafted by Miami Dolphins this year, you just don't know that, right? Those guys did everything they possibly could for 4 and 5 seasons for the Miami Dolphins, and they just got their walking papers. And it sounds like the Dolphins weren't even just given their cap situations, weren't even attempting to get those guys back. And that, to me, again, that's why they get a C+ for me. New York Jets, who are active. This one, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this because they did a lot of interesting things. They obviously had some big losses. DJ Reed, their cornerback, walks out the door. Hassan Reddick as well, who maybe
Morgan
that's a good
Moses.
thing after that whole saga last year. Morgan Moses, their right tackle from a year ago that they signed, walks as well. Tyron Smith, still a free agent. We'll see what happens with him. Last year, though, unfortunately, looked like may have been his last. But they retained Jamian Sherwood, Isaiah Oliver, Tony Adams, some pieces to that defense, and signed Justin Fields at quarterback, Brandon Stevens at cornerback, Andre Sisco at safety, and then some budget signings in Josh Myers at center, Rashad Weaver off the edge, Chuka Okorafor at right tackle. So what do you think about this Jets free agency period that had a lot going on?
I gave them a B+. I gave the Jets a B+. They had a lot going on. Most importantly, got a quarterback. They got a quarterback, a guy who's 26 years old, highly, talented player. Potential is there. So that's a plus. You get your quarterback, a quarterback the organization was confident in believers of, and they went out and made him their guy. Great move. You got another starter in Brandon Stevens. I know some Baltimore Ravens fans was a bit annoyed sometime with him, but he's a scrappy guy. He doesn't turn down a battle. And you have to be a scrappy corner playing for Aaron Glenn, playing under Aaron Glenn as your head coach. So that's a starter. You got Andre Sisco, another starter, right? In the secondary, Andre Sisco is a very, very physical, imposing player that has a nose for the ball, and he doesn't mind sticking his face in the fan. So I love that as well. You talked about some under-the-radar signings with Weaver, Okafor, and things like that. They just added depth to an area they needed to add depth in. And bringing back Sherwood is a huge plus because he really earned the right to remain a Jet. You know what I mean? He's a guy that does things the right way. And it seems like his voice carries through the locker room, especially on the defensive side. So I gave him a B+.
Yeah, I went B- for a couple of reasons. I love the Sherwood retaining him. But the thing was, for a 1-year starter, they really didn't get the 1-year starter discount. They still paid him 3 years, $45 million, right? They paid him close to the top of the market. So from that perspective, it's I like it, but still came a lot. Brandon Stevens to me was just a guy you don't want as one of your starting corners from when I saw on tape last year, the Baltimore Ravens. He was the weak link in that secondary more often than not. Andre Cisco signing I love, though. I think this is a guy that can pay off big dividends going to a better situation there, which is more talent around him because he has such good range on the back end. But it really is going to come down to the Justin Fields move. If he balls out, this is an A+, right? 2 years, $40 million is like a drop in the bucket for a starting quarterback in today's NFL. But, there's a reason 2 different other teams have given up on him at this point, and it's because just he keeps leaving you wanting more. So for the New York Jets, it's a chance. It's a swing of the bat, but I went B+ just because I've seen enough at this point that I'm not buying into the next step from him, but I'll be happy to be proven wrong if it does come. New England Patriots, last one in the AFC East. They had to have it because they had more cap space than anyone else in the NFL heading into this. And boy, did they blow through a good chunk of it, signing Milton Williams to over $100 million deal, Carlton Davis at corner, Harold Landry off the edge, reuniting with his head coach there, Robert Spillane at linebacker, Morgan Moses at right tackle, Mac Hollins at receiver, and then some budget signings in Josh Dobbs, Kayvon Chason, Kyrus Tonga, Jalen Hawkins, Wes Schweitzer, and Marcus Epps. So the biggest, cash outlay of any team in the NFL. What'd you think of it?
I gave the New England Patriots an A. They had the most money, and they spent wisely, in my opinion. They weren't careless in how they were going about spending their dollars, which is a very, very important thing. You talked about areas of concern for their team a year ago on the defensive side. They could not put pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They were dead last in sacks, only 28 sacks. They were at the bottom of the barrel in the pressure rate, putting pressure on opposing quarterbacks. So what they did, went and got the most coveted interior defensive lineman, went and got one of the best corners that was available in Carlton Davis, went and got another surprise edge player who became available in Harold Landry, who Coach Vrabel has a relationship with because he coached him in Tennessee. Went out and got a 3-down linebacker in Robert Spillane, who's really earned every dollar he's earned in the National Football League. Went and got an experienced player to add to the offensive line in Morgan Moses. I love everything about what they've done. I really thought they would go out and get more of a bigger signing at wide receiver than Mac Hollins, but let's see exactly what they have the rest of the way, because clearly you want to add more explosive talent around your young quarterback in Drake May. But in all, hats off to New England. They did a great job in making their team better.
Yes, I went A-. I had no complaints about truly any of the signings. I think the numbers they got the guys to, I'm not going to haggle with. They had to do it. And I think the guys they added, this defense is going to have a lot more teeth this upcoming season. It's more just how much better is the offensive line and how much better is the skill position talent for Drake May. It's not at this point. And Morgan Moses at his age is 34 years old with injuries even a year ago that not going to be not a guy I'm necessarily trusting is going to turn around my tackle issue. So at that point, you really are still rolling the dice hard here. The only thing keeping this from an A or an A+ is that your receiving core is like Kayshon Boutte, Jalen Polk, Demario Douglas next year, unless you draft some guy at number 4 overall. And they might, Travis Hunter might be their number 1 wide receiver next year. And this might be moot, or, Armand Membu might be their starting left tackle next year and ball out, and this might be moot. But they had a lot of cash, and Drake May's life doesn't look a ton easier is the only thing that I'm a little worried about keeping this from an A.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm right there with you. They should have improved that wide receiver room more so than what they've already done.
Problem was, though, just receiver class was just all vets, not a lot of guys who were, all the biggest ones, DK Metcalf, T. Higgins.
Yeah, they should have a second rounder for DK.
Compared to this year's class, we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing. Obviously, they could be drafting someone who ends up surpassing that. But yeah, Drake May's looking like, hey guys, what about me?
Exactly.
What about me here?